The Mueller investigation may be over, but as for the congressional look into Russian election interference, it seems the road ahead is a long one.
The White House has directed me that I not disclose the substance of any conversations with the president.
Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski told the House Judiciary Committee yesterday that he was respecting, quote, executive branch confidentiality. But Democrats argued that since Lewandowski never actually worked in the executive branch, he didn't have the right to refuse.
The president is intent on obstructing our legitimate oversight. You are aiding him in that obstruction.
Not going to stonewall me in my questioning.
But, of course, he did, frustrating the Democrats, many of whom have been signaling support for opening a formal impeachment inquiry.
The fact is, we are doing what is our job under the Constitution, which is to say to conduct a series of hearings and investigation into whether to recommend, to determine whether to recommend articles of impeachment.
Nadler's boss, on the other hand, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, sees things a bit differently. She criticized Nadler in a closed-door meeting last week, according to a new report from Politico, declaring, quote, Democrats simply don't have the votes on the floor to impeach Trump. In the end, it is a Democratic Party divided, and it seems like every day the two sides are moving further apart. So how big of a problem is that with elections around the corner? I'm joined by Shannon O'Brien, former state treasurer and Democratic candidate for governor, Michael Curry, former president of the Boston NAACP, now chair of the National NAACP Advocacy and Policy Committee, and Charles Blandy, an activist and co-founder of the political blog Blue Mask Group. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Charlie, let me start with you. The website Vox, which I think of as being generally left-leaning, offered this assessment of the Lewandowski hearing. Vox said, the hearing didn't seem politically effective for Democrats. It was a partisan food fight that produced little new information of import. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think that the issue is less whether it provides new information. I don't think that we frankly need new information at this point. We know that the Trump administration, or that the Trump's operatives worked with Russia. At the very least, Lewandowski said that he did not refuse, he did not report Russian interference or Russian contacts to the FBI. He said, well, that's somebody else's job. And the fact is, we know what we need to know, that this campaign worked with Russian operatives, and that it's, and we should know everything that we need to know. And to hear Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, handing over their power of impeachment, even if it is only political power, is very discouraging to grassroots Democrats, I have to say.
Hold the impeachment thought for one sec, because I want to get you two to weigh in on the Lewandowski stagecraft. Did you think that Democrats, if you accept Charlie's premise that, you know, that there are certain knowns that are known facts that are damaging, did getting Lewandowski to come up and testify yesterday strengthen the Democrats' hands in any way, or was it just, I was going to use an unbroadcastable phrase, was it just sort of this chaotic, ineffectual attempt at political theater?
Well, I think they have an obligation, right? The obligation is to investigate this. I think that's their role, is to investigate it. And Lewandowski being invited in to contribute to that, he did what I think many expected him to do. He was an obstructionist. You know, he came in and didn't answer questions. He deflected. Much of what we see out of this president is starting to play out with his operatives. Deflect, blame the media, not answer questions. I think that they have a responsibility. I'm always reminded of our former governor, Deval Patrick, which he made a comment to the Democratic Party, he said, grow a backbone. And the backbone is,
he said that a few times,
to the speaker as well. Ask the critical questions, do the critical investigation. Even if it doesn't lead to impeachment, we want to know the truth.
The other thing that Lewandowski did yesterday, or one other thing he did, is he got to sort of, as you alluded to, recite GOP talking points and get a little free PR for his nascent campaign for U.S. Senate. Let's take another look at him in action.
As for actual collusion or conspiracy, there was none. What there has been, however, is harassment of this president from the day he won the election.
So, Shannon, if you have, on the one hand, Democrats saying, you know, we know that these negative things occurred, and then on the other hand, you have sympathetic Republican legislators rushing to Lewandowski's defense and him basically advertising for his campaign, isn't that a scratch?
What a great way to launch a campaign for the United States Senate, by acknowledging that you only have to tell the truth if you're under oath.
No obligation to tell the truth
obligation
to the media,
to
right?
tell the truth. But the media is basically talking to the people. So he literally said, what comes out of my mouth when I am speaking to the press, you can't trust. You don't know it's truthful. But I do believe that yesterday was important. First of all, he went on the record as basically being part of the effort to obstruct justice. Furthermore, he may have been part of an additional obstruction situation where you had the president telling him not to speak to Congress. I can remember growing up as a kid, there was a TV show called Get Smart. Do you remember the cone of silence?
I do.
He is not inside that cone of silence. If they were looking to talk about some sort of executive privilege, you have Get Smart under the cone of silence. Lewandowski is out there. He is just a tool for obstruction, and I think that he made that very clear. Even though he did not answer a lot of questions, it was very clear he continues to be a part of that obstruction process.
All right, let's get to Nancy Pelosi and impeachment. Charlie, you talked about grassroots Democratic frustration, that she is not where more and more of her members have been, maybe where a big chunk of the party is. But there is this new poll that came out, sort of in line with previous polls, and this I think was a Political Morning Consult poll that showed 37% of voters across the board backing impeachment and 50% opposed. Does that suggest maybe that Pelosi is right to be a little bit cautious?
No, it
Why?
suggests exactly the opposite. I can tell you that when I raise money or when I ask other people to support a Democratic candidate, for instance, Jared Golden in Maine, which who I raised a lot of money for and went up to canvass for, I am asking the people who I know in my network, I am saying that there is a measure of accountability that you are going to get by supporting Democrats, not simply in your own district, but across the board. The fact is that that kind of polling is very fluid, and if Democrats act on their principles, then the polling will change. If the Democrats lead, the polling will change. If the Democrats put out everything in a line and put all of the evidence out there, that polling will change. On the other hand, if they refuse to do their job, that polling won't change. It'll stay where it is. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Do you guys think Charlie's right?
I think Charlie's right. I think there's a messiness of an impeachment process that Americans in general are not comfortable with. And they'd rather let the clock run out and have him voted out of office. But I do believe if Democrats move forward with an impeachment process, the polls will change as people find out more information. People feel inundated and overwhelmed by this administration. People don't even tune into the news sometimes because they feel like there's such corruption coming out of this administration. Let's tell the truth. Let's expose that. And I do believe an impeachment process is necessary.
And Congresswoman Liz Holtzman, who was on the Judiciary Committee when President Nixon was impeached, that is about the percentage of people in the United States, about 38%, who supported impeachment at the time. But she also has pointed out in disputing what Attorney General Barr has said, that there has to be a vote by the House to approve this impeachment before they will give up this secret information from the Mueller report. The fact is, they were able to do their investigation, get the information that they needed, and then bring that to the full Congress. We don't even know if that leads to impeachment. Does it lead to a censure? But the fact is the process and the Congress would be derelict if they actually don't do this, because then it undermines, I think, our entire system of democracy.
So it seems like you guys are pretty much on the same page when it comes to the Lewandowski hearing and when it comes to impeachment, where the Dems should go. Let me ask you about this other impeachment possibility which has recently surfaced, which is the prospect of impeachment Brett Kavanaugh, President Trump's second Supreme Court justice. Ayanna Pressley just introduced a motion to impeach him. Let's take a look at her explaining.
One of the reasons why I ran for Congress is to fight for the healing and the justice of all survivors. And it's deeply concerning that someone who serves on the highest court of the land could have this many allegations.
This is on the heels of that New York Times book excerpt, which had some issues but suggested that there is at least a second potentially credible claim of sexual assault against Justice Kavanaugh. Is this smart? And I'm leery of saying smart politically when you're talking about something involving such serious allegations, but I'm going to do it anyway. Is this politically smart for Democrats, or given how passionately conservatives feel about getting their kind of nominee on the Supreme Court, is this something that could potentially backfire in 2020?
So, yeah, I would just say that it's funny, this conversation sort of evolved in what's the right thing to do and what's the political thing
You're
to do.
You're highlighting my awkwardness, which is a good thing to do.
And it's a tough thing for all of us to have. I tend to err on the side of the right thing to do and let the politics work itself out. And the reality is Kavanaugh lied, and we have an opportunity to expose that. Now, we know realistically we are not in a place where it probably will impeach a sitting Supreme Court justice. Whether you get a majority of the House and 2/3 of the Senate, that process is a bar that we probably won't meet. But there's a benefit to the process of impeachment that we get to the truth. We didn't get to the truth in those hearings. It was quite frankly a sham. FBI investigators weren't allowed to do the kind of investigatory process which would have gotten us to the truth. And that's there should be a heightened scrutiny for anyone that gets that kind of a position.
Unfortunately, we got to leave it there. Charlie Blandy, Michael Curry, Shannon O'Brien, thank you all for being here.